41 and 42 were considered by the Public Safety and Neighborhood Services Committee at a regular meeting on Thursday, July 9th, and both were forwarded as committee reports. Item 41. This item was recommended as amended, but with the same title. It reads, Ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to state that it is city policy to expand the availability of site-based permanent supportive housing that prohibits on-site illicit drug use among residents to meet the demand of people experiencing homelessness who prefer such a residential option, to require that the city funding for new site-based PSH for people experiencing homelessness be used for drug-free PSH, except where operation of the housing as drug-free PSH would conflict with standards imposed by law or by a condition of other funding where the funding is for new construction, or the board has waived the funding requirement based on specific findings, to require the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing to survey residents of site-based PSH to assess their interest in living in either drug-tolerant PSH or drug-free PSH, and to report on the survey findings and HSH's strategies to meet PSH residents' demands, and to require HSH to adopt rules and regulations establishing standards and protocols for evictions from city-funded drug-free housing.
Chair Dorsey.
Thank you, President Mandelman. Colleagues, as you probably know, this legislation has been a work in progress and a labor of love of mine for more than 2 years now. I want to thank all my co-sponsors, especially Board President Mandelman, who has been an original thought partner from the start. I assume I speak for all of my co-sponsors when I acknowledge how worthwhile it has been to demonstrate an abundance of collaboration, even if it took a lot longer. In an evolving policy landscape at the state and federal levels, we have honored all good faith requests to find common ground with advocates wherever possible. I'm proud of the way we worked collaboratively with various interests, colleagues, HSH, the mayor's office, and both the Breed and Lurie administrations. While there was probably never a scenario to win unanimous support for this, I think we forged a better legislative proposal, one that will make much needed, if modest, progress on drug-free PSH options for those who choose them. This legislation is an incremental approach. It ensures that only new city-funded permanent supportive housing will prohibit illicit drug use on site. It will not affect state-funded PSH. It will not apply to new construction currently in the pipeline, and it will not change a single existing drug-tolerant PSH building or model. The drug-free lease provision we're proposing to add is legally identical to all standard residential leases here in California, the same leases that already cover more than 240,000 San Franciscans who don't live in permanent supportive housing. This is not sober housing. It is not recovery housing. It does not prohibit alcohol or marijuana or medically assisted treatment. I also want to be clear about whom this legislation is for. It responds to real needs of PSH residents themselves, people who may or may not be in recovery, but who simply want to live in a drug-free residential community. Families, seniors, and others, people who deserve the choice of a drug-free option for any reason that covers all other residential tenants in San Francisco. With one exception, and that's a 42-unit site at 1174 Folsom Street in my district, we currently have no drug-free PSH options in our city-funded system. This legislation at its core is about giving PSH residents a choice. Importantly, residents who may choose drug-free PSH are making an intentional choice, one they would be opting into a community as with an illicit drug-free rule, and making a commitment to abide by it. That intentionality is the foundation that this policy is built on. It's about respecting the choices of PSH residents themselves, and also, along with that, honoring that the Department of Homelessness and Supportive Housing will have a need to manage and enforce it. Based on what we have seen at 1174 Folsom and what we've also learned from drug-free PSH providers in the state of Oregon, we should expect evictions under this ordinance to be exceedingly rare. The self-selection of residents who voluntarily opt into drug-free residential communities largely solves in advance for scenarios that involve persistent drug relapses or habitual returns to use. Still, even though they may be very rare, edge case scenarios exist, and this legislation must address them, given that relocations may be necessary to protect the integrity of drug-free residential communities. No resident of drug-free PSH will ever be evicted for a single relapse. And critically, we've built a robust process in this legislation that requires HSH to offer alternative housing or shelter, together with services, before an eviction can even take place. Finally, this ordinance provides for a participatory and inclusive rulemaking process. Colleagues and advocates will have ample opportunity to help shape rules and policies that best serve residents as this legislation is implemented. Now, having said that, I am aware that there is interest from colleagues in amendments, and I am on board with one that will further commit this legislation to the goal of avoiding evictions. And accordingly, I would like to move an amendment to add evictions and to page 8, line 24, so that subsection now reads 3, in collaboration with the Department of Public Health, making a good faith effort to accommodate such residents' housing and service needs when identifying alternative placements, with the goal of avoiding evictions and returns to homelessness. Now, it's also my understanding that there is interest in an additional amendment that would remove shelters as a relocation option. I will respectfully not be supporting that amendment, and although I'm not philosophically opposed to it, after consulting with the Mayor's Policy Director, Kunal Modi, who's been working closely with HSH on how this legislation would be administered and enforced if enacted, I'm told that removing shelters as a relocation option could risk sabotaging HSH's ability to maintain the integrity of a drug-free community. That obviously would run counter to the core intent of this legislation. In the event that a comparable unit is not available, I believe we need to have the option of shelter. That's what HSH and Mr. Modi have informed me. Keeping all options open for these edge cases will help to serve our shared goal of avoiding returns to homelessness. As a policymaker, I think we should be sensitive to not being overly prescriptive in how we legislate to avoid setting our departments up for failure. I want to give HSH the flexibility it needs to make drug-free housing successful. I am confident that the specifics on housing offers, evictions, and broader program components can be addressed in the rulemaking process. I have spoken with the incoming HSH director, Mike Levine, and he has assured me that the rulemaking process will be participatory and inclusive, as this legislative process has been. So I do want to thank the leaders, organizations, academics who supported this legislation. Two of them are giants in the drug policy realm. Keith Humphreys, who served as President Obama's White House advisor, Anna Lemke, who serves as Director of Addiction Medicine at Stanford. Thanks as well to my brothers and sisters from the recovery community, especially recovery community advocates Theris Coates and Richard Beal, who are co-founders of Brothers Against Drugs. Similarly, Cedric Akbar, Steve Adami, Tom Wolfe, Brandon Clark, Amber Richmond, among others. Positive Directions Equals Change, Mothers Against Drug Addiction and Deaths, the Salvation Army, Bay Area Council, and the American Addiction Recovery Association, especially Merrick Fitro, who is a member of its Board of Governors. And with that, I want to thank all my colleagues. Thank you for hearing me out and working with me on this. I hope to have your support on the amendment and also on the legislation.
Supervisor Dorsey has made a motion to amend the legislation. It has been seconded by Supervisor Sherrill. Supervisor Fielder.
Thanks, President Mandelman. Colleagues, firstly, I just want to say I do believe in having more abstinent or sober housing as an option for unhoused people who are in recovery from substance use disorder. So I support that spirit of the legislation, and I support the provision of this legislation that I think smartly administers a survey of permanent supportive housing residents, the aim of which is to assess their interest in abstinent housing. For that, I thank Supervisor Dorsey for taking on this work. However, I just first want to say I think the terminology in this legislation is problematic. I'm not sure how bifurcating permanent housing into drug-tolerant versus drug-free housing past review with the City Attorney's Office, as this kind of framing, I would think, puts a litigation target on the city's back. And the term drug-tolerant housing suggests that the city allows people to openly use drugs in city-funded permanent supportive housing, and that's just not the case. Less legally risky and, to me, less stigmatizing terminology would be abstinent or sober housing and low-barrier housing. I also appreciate Supervisor Dorsey for adding an amendment clarifying the goal of this legislation is to avoid evictions. However, I fear that the legislation before us, as written, lacks strong protocols for providing support to residents facing eviction from abstinent housing and will have the unintended consequence of actually driving up homelessness and therefore drug use on our streets. Getting people into permanently supportive housing takes a tremendous amount of city effort in the first place. The legislation as written allows for someone to be evicted from sober housing to a shelter. That is not going to provide someone in recovery stability. Research shows that relapse is a part of recovery as much as 6 times before they get sober, which is why upon second relapse, people should be offered the option for treatment, and if they participate in treatment, be able to return to their unit. Shelter is not housing. Shelter is a rough place for someone struggling with substance use disorder to be. A person is not considered housed when they're in shelter. They're still considered homeless. I also think it is feasible for the city to provide and relocate someone to comparable alternative housing. As of right now, today, San Francisco has 762 vacant permanent supportive housing units out of its inventory of over 9,163 units. Of these empty units, 322 are currently undergoing the move-in process, 345 are offline for maintenance or repairs, and a whole 95 are fully ready for immediate tenant referrals. I appreciate all the work that's been put into this legislation to minimize the legislation's impact on evictions, but I still think it doesn't provide enough policy direction to ensure that people will not be evicted back to shelters and therefore into housing instability. For this reason, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the following amendments that my staff distributed earlier today. The City Attorney's Office has confirmed these are non-substantive and will not delay the passage of this legislation. The amendments are as follows. Page 4, line 19, for relocation to another option, striking out or shelter. On page 8, lines 12 and 13, confirmation from HHH that the resident has been offered comparable alternative housing, striking out or shelter to ensure that they are not evicted into homelessness. And page 8, line 19, offering such residents appropriate alternative housing, striking out shelter, placement, or a pathway to housing prior to program discharge or eviction. Colleagues, I would appreciate your support.
Supervisor Fielder has made a motion. Is there a second for seconded by Melgar? Supervisor Melgar.
Thank you so much. I wanted to start my remarks by thanking Supervisor Dorsey. When you first spoke to me about this legislation, I was like over a year ago. You've been at this for a really long time. And this legislation actually has really moved. So I wanted to, first of all, thank you for your engagement and for incorporating my feedback and the feedback of others in the community. And I know that it took a lot of head and heart for you to do that, and I just want to appreciate you for that. I am uncomfortable in some of the similar ways as were described by Supervisor Fielder. And I think that I can get over my discomfort of words, especially if our city attorney is vouching for this, and as I assume they did because it's approved as to form. And I want to appreciate your passion to provide services and alternatives for this population. However, I do want to strongly make a pitch to support Supervisor Fielder's amendments as proposed. I think we are trying to try out something new, and I think that whenever you try something new, you're building a lot of things and assumptions and frameworks from scratch. In putting this forward, we are putting forward a new policy, and I think it's entirely appropriate, even if the department wants maximum flexibility for us to say, but these are the parameters. This is what we don't want to happen. We don't want somebody who doesn't have the linear progression of, being sober, falls off the wagon a couple times, to have to go back to square one. and have to start in the coordinated entry system at shelter, because as my colleague Supervisor Fielder described, it's not a good place to be, especially if you're in crisis. And so we all know that we have hundreds of units in permanent supportive housing that are vacant. I think that setting a parameter for the department is appropriate. I will say I had a recent experience with the department with the RV program, which was mostly successful. And there has been hiccups on the one-offs, people who don't quite fit or, fell through the cracks in the outreach. And so I do think that it is appropriate to, sort of put that parameter and say, this is what we would like to see. And I think Supervisor Fielder's amendments do speak to that. I thank you so much for preparing them, Supervisor Fielder. And then, again, thank you, Supervisor Dorsey, for the work and passion that you have put into this.
Supervisor Dorsey.
Thank you, President Mandelman. I do want to address the terminology around drug tolerant as distinct from drug free, and explain why. Throughout this process, I have consistently identified this as a hill I would absolutely die on. Those of us in the policymaking realm can sometimes adopt terms of art that we understand without fully appreciating that these euphemisms and slogans hold no intrinsic or intuitive meaning for the people they're designed to serve. There is nothing about terms like housing first, or traditional PSH, or low barrier, or harm reduction housing that could reasonably or intuitively be expected to mean drug tolerant, even though that's exactly what the law means. I want to read from California law here. This is Welfare and Institutions Code section 8255. This is where the core components of Housing First mandate the following lease provisions in permanent supportive housing for state-funded PSH. Quote, the use of alcohol or drugs in and of itself without other lease violations is not a reason for eviction. Services are informed by a harm reduction philosophy that recognizes drug use and addiction as part of tenants' lives, and it prescribes that support for residents who engage in illicit drug use to be non-judgmental communication in which tenants are offered education on how to engage in safer practices. I have no objections to that, but by any definition, these provisions are drug tolerant. They're also wholly unique to PSH residents. These are not lease provisions found in any other residential lease in San Francisco or in California, for that matter. There are professional standards around public health communications, including in the AMA's Code of Medical Ethics, that caution against the use of euphemisms and slogans when it masks information that is important and meaningful to those being served. And I think it is the height of policymaking arrogance, frankly, to assume that individuals exiting homelessness into PSH should be expected to know that the euphemism housing first means drug tolerant, even though that information may mean everything to the health and well-being of the resident we're endeavoring to serve. I had a constituent named Daniel McLennan. Daniel is a talented artist, a former PSH resident on 6th Street in my district. Some of you may have met him or recall him because he testified in favor of Assemblymember Matt Haney's legislation in Sacramento to reform housing first at the state level. Daniel is also a recovering opioid addict. Here is somebody who's literally fighting for his life on medication-assisted treatment, and we placed him into a housing-first environment with no forewarning of how drug-tolerant and chaotic the environment we were putting him into was. It was very nearly catastrophic to his well-being. It broke my heart to hear him say how damaging his living environment was to his mental health and to his sobriety. He told me that if he didn't have responsibility for a dog, he would rather be on the street because it would have been better for his mental health. The good news is that Daniel just celebrated 1 year of continuous sobriety, but he had to do it in Fresno. I have another constituent who's also in recovery for alcohol. She is a mother of 3 children who told me she had no idea that the facility we moved her family into, this is the Margot in my district, would have such rampant drug use. She told me that after doing everything she could to rescue her kids from the trauma of unsheltered homelessness, they were being re-traumatized by fatal overdoses happening all around them. She worked with my office to get relocated, but for a mother of 3 small children in recovery herself, information about the drug-tolerant policies she would be living in would have been good information for her to have in advance. She has since moved to another facility where there is more separation between families and habitual drug users, but it really has been a challenge for her and her family, and she strongly supports a drug-free alternative. Both of these constituents, among many other brothers and sisters in recovery, inspired this legislation. But they're also abiding examples of why PSH residents deserve the courtesy of clear, accurate terminology and not misleading euphemisms about drug policies where they reside. This is important to their sobriety and in many ways, by extension, important to their very survival. And that was why this is such an important policy that I think we describe it accurately.
Supervisor Chen.
Thank you, Board President. First, I also would like to acknowledge Supervisor Dorsey and the work that he and his team have put into this legislation. I recognize that he has spent a lot of time working on amendments to try to alleviate concerns from different stakeholders. I want to say that on the record that I am very supportive of sober housing solutions. At the same time, I still have some concerns about this legislation. I don't believe that our city should be implementing sober housing environments in a way that could cause harm to those who cannot live successfully in that environment. Sober housing solutions should not come at the risk of making some people housing insecure. Given the affordability crisis facing in the city, coupled it with the fact that we are actively trying to create more flow through the PSH system, and I'm worried that adding new barrier will be counterintuitive to our long-term goals. Again, I'm very appreciative of all the good faith and good work that you and the care that you put in, Supervisor Dorsey, and also your team, and also all the different stakeholders on this legislation. And I also would like to say that I am supportive of Supervisor Fielder's amendment, and if her amendments passes, then I will also be then willing and able to support this legislation. Thank you.
Supervisor Chan.
Thank you. Yes, I am in agreement and share the sentiment that, thank you, Supervisor Dorsey. I think that it does take a lot of effort for the city to have alternatives. And I think that when Director Dan Tsai actually was appointed to his position, one of the questions was asked specifically about how do we really problem solve the fentanyl crisis in San Francisco? And I really appreciate his answer at that moment. And I think that is where my approach is to public health crisis, and when it comes to the drug crisis, is that we have to meet people where they're at, and that we need to provide all options. And I absolutely believe that sober housing, drug-free housing is and has to be absolutely an option that we offer as a city. I think for here that I can also understand to make sure that we protect the integrity of sober housing and drug-free housing, that for those who fall short of that, will have to reconsider or be reconsidered for a different location. To continue on with treatment and housing option. I think that is where the rubber meets the road, and it makes it difficult. For us to figure out how then do we still continue to support these individuals who clearly fall short and cannot maintain sobriety in these situations, and actually impact those who seek sobriety and are having success and already working hard, towards to maintain that success. And so what I'm seeing is that it pains me to see the language in here that I totally understand the challenge and the struggle with words, and how do we identify these housing and options for individuals, and to make sure that the intent is clear, the policy is clear. It also pains me to see that I don't see that they are mutually exclusive, meaning to support those who are fighting hard and maintain success in sober housing, and those who have fallen short and need alternative options so that they can remain housed and still receive treatment. If you, and I think that it's the reason why I support both Supervisor Dorsey's amendments as well as Supervisor Fielder's amendments today. I would love to see the word relocation instead of eviction in this policy, to be honest, and to kind of put the responsibility actually on the city, given the fact that we're now narrowing it down to city-funded and new sites. I think that the city should have an ownership in this to say that we should own that to provide and support the providers and operators that reallocate individuals who fall short in the drug-free housing setting. I am struggling with this, and I have been since the time that Supervisor Dorsey has introduced this legislation. I was very grateful the fact that there was agreement to send this back to committee so that there was ongoing conversation and discussion and allowing some space. But I did know that eventually we'll come back, and I was hoping for a version that with using terminology that I can be on board with and be more comfortable with, because I do know it is not actually about the terminology or just about the terminology being used, but truly it's really about the policy that it's being implemented and how we can actually support individuals with their diverse needs and with diverse options, and that they can all reach success and become functioning members of our society once more. And because I do recognize that it's a public health crisis and it's a disease, that no one should be criminalized for fighting and to get better and try to get, but also no one should be homeless when they also trying to, again, fight this disease. So I am struggling with this, colleagues, and I'm hoping that we can approve both the amendments so that we can support this for now and revisit this conversation once more once we learn better about the data and how successful individuals can be, and whether or not people do end up falling into homelessness, and how do we end up supporting the individuals. Thank you.
Supervisor Wong.
Colleagues, I'm proud to co-sponsor this measure because at its core, it is about giving people a chance. People working to overcome addiction deserve a chance to live somewhere that supports their recovery. Families with children, seniors, and residents who simply want a home free from illicit drug use deserve that chance too. San Francisco has tried many approaches with good intentions, but good intentions alone are not enough, and the results speak for themselves. Too many people remain trapped in addiction. Too many residents feel unsafe in their own buildings, and too many people trying to recover are being asked to do so while surrounded by the very substances they're trying to leave behind. When the current approach is not producing the results we need, we have a responsibility to try new ideas. And I don't really care for whichever terminology we use. The bottom line is that the current model may work for some residents, but it should not be the only option. This legislation creates more drug-free supportive housing for people who actively want an environment that supports sobriety and recovery. This is not about punishment and is not about expecting perfection. Relapse can be part of recovery, and one mistake should not automatically cost someone their home. The measure includes protections and requires that alternative housing be offered before an otherwise compliant resident can be evicted for drug use. Compassion means more than maintaining the status quo. It means being honest about what is not working and giving people better choices. We cannot guarantee recovery, but we can give people a real chance at it.
Nobody else is in the queue. Supervisor Dorsey, I want to thank you for this is one of those moments where I'm grateful for your presence on this board. I'm grateful for your passion around getting San Francisco on a different path. And let's make no mistake, the path we're on is a distressing and disturbing one. The status quo is insane. The status quo in which so many folks living in permanent supportive housing developments are consigned to deal with the most outrageous behavior from their neighbors, and the managers of those buildings are unable to do anything about it because of government policy. And the status quo in those neighborhoods that are impacted by the rampant sales and use in public space of drugs is unacceptable. And so, Supervisor Dorsey, your measure here that you have labored over for a year, more than a year, is the most modest, incremental step in the direction of supporting recovery in this housing. It does not apply to the 10,000 plus existing units of permanent supportive housing that are drug tolerant. It does not apply to most of the new permanent supportive housing that will come online, as you have described. It will apply to the small fraction of PSH that comes online that is funded by city funding without another funding source. So I have no anxiety about your measure. I think it is extremely important that we make this enforceable by our departments. I'm happy to support your amendment, and I will not be supporting the other. Madam Clerk, do you care which order we vote on these amendments?
The motion made by Supervisor Dorsey, seconded by Supervisor Sherrill.
Would be first. All right. Can you please call the roll on that amendment?
On the Dorsey-Sherrill amendment to item 41, Supervisor Sauter. Sauter, aye. Supervisor Sherrill. Sherrill, aye. Supervisor Walton. Walton, no. Supervisor Wong. Wong, aye. Supervisor Chan. Chan, aye. Supervisor Chen. Chen, aye. Supervisor Dorsey. Dorsey, aye. Supervisor Fielder. Fielder, aye. Supervisor Mahmoud. Mahmoud, aye. Supervisor Mandelman.
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. And Supervisor Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. There are 10 ayes and 1 no, with Supervisor Walton voting no.
The motion passes. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll on the second amendment, Fielder
Yes, on the
and
Fielder
Melgar?
Melgar amendment to item 41, Supervisor Sauter. Sauter, no. Supervisor Sherrill. Sherrill, no. Supervisor Walton. Walton, aye. Supervisor Wong. Wong, no. Supervisor Chan. Chan, aye. Supervisor Chen. Chen, aye. Supervisor Dorsey. Dorsey, no. Supervisor Fielder. Fielder, aye. Supervisor Mahmoud. Mahmoud, no. Supervisor Mandelman.
No.
Mandelman, no. And Supervisor Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. There are 5 ayes and 6 noes, with Supervisors Sauter, Sherrill, Wong, Dorsey, Mahmoud, and Mandelman voting no.
Sorry, and so there are
5 ayes.
5 ayes, and the motion does not pass. Okay. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll on the amended item?
On item 41, as amended, Supervisor Sauter. Sauter, aye. Supervisor Sherrill. Sherrill, aye. Supervisor Walton. Walton, no. Supervisor Wong. Wong, aye. Supervisor Chan. Chan, no. Supervisor Chen. Chen, no. Supervisor Dorsey. Dorsey, aye. Supervisor Fielder. Fielder, no. Supervisor Mahmoud. Mahmoud, aye. Supervisor Mandelman.
Aye.
Mandelman, aye. And Supervisor Melgar.
Aye.
Melgar, aye. There are 7 ayes and 4 noes, with Supervisors Walton, Chan, Chen, and Fielder voting no.
The ordinance is passed on first reading. Supervisor Chen.
I sincerely apologize.